Welcome to a new edition of the Neon Jazz Interview Series with jazz bassist and composer Clint Eastwood. As usual, Kyle is releasing quality albums charting his evolution as a musician. His latest offering is 2017 CD In Transit. So he is the son of jazz lover and filmmaker Clint Eastwood, and he grew up listening to records by legends like Miles Davis, Dave Brubeck, and Thelonious Monk. He went on to study film at the University of Southern California for 2 years before embarking on a musical career. That has led him to many albums on his own and being part of scores for films like The Rookie, Mystic River, $1 Million Baby, and so many more. So please get to know him and dig this interview, my friends. So again, Kyle, thank you for taking a minute out. I appreciate it.
Oh, yeah, my pleasure.
So let me go ahead and dive right in here. Your latest album, In Transit, keeps in line with your evolution as a jazz musician. I want to ask you very simply, how do you feel about this release?
I'm really happy with it. I'm really happy with the way it came out, and I mean, it's a really good representation of the band that I've been sort of developing for quite a few years now, and I mean, I'm really happy with the way everyone played and the original compositions, and I'm happy.
The one thing that is interesting about the evolution and the life of a jazz musician, I always try to figure out, you've been at this for a while. This is your 8th album. What do you view as each successive album? Is it an evolution for you? Is it a time and space for you? Or how do you view this chronology of albums that you put out?
Well, yeah, I mean, I hope that I'm always, growing as a composer and as a player. I think it's always, when music's always sort of a progression anyway. So I think hopefully there's always some progression there, and yeah, I mean, yeah, definitely they represent a certain time and place, I guess, in my life. But yeah, I mean, I'm always hopefully trying to bring something new to it. I mean, there's a lot of influence of certain eras and the type of music and particularly jazz that I like. But hopefully we're bringing something new to it always.
Yeah, without a doubt. So you grew up kind of baptized with really good jazz, from Miles to Monk to Stan Kenton. You had parents that were jazz lovers. Was jazz an immediate thing that just stirred your soul? Did you always feel jazz?
I always liked it. I mean, I grew up also listening to a lot of other kinds of music, and I mean, growing up as a kid in the 70s and 80s, there was a lot of popular music and stuff that I was listening to. But yeah, I mean, my earliest sort of memories of music or of jazz, there's certain records that I hear and they bring me back to my childhood and stuff that my parents were listening to, as I was growing up. Yeah, I mean, there was sort of predominantly what they were always listening to. The playlist around the house is usually jazz with the odd maybe Johnny Cash record or Ray Charles or stuff like that in there. But yeah, it was mostly a lot of Duke Ellington and a lot of big band stuff, and then like Dave Brubeck and Miles Davis and stuff like that.
So when you went to the Monterey Jazz Festival in your youth, what was it? What musicians, what memories really do you remember from going to that festival that really worked on you?
The first time I think I went was about 1976 or 77. Like, my dad took me, and it was we saw the Count Basie big band when Count Basie was still alive, and Joe Williams, I think, was sitting in playing with the band, and no, I just remember I think it was the very first concert that I really ever remember going to. So I mean, I was very impressed. I mean, it got me interested in maybe wanting to play the drums at that time, because it was quite a powerful sort of swinging, big band. And we watched some of the concert from the audience, and then we watched like the second half from sort of at the side of the stage. So yeah, I remember being kind of impressed with it. And I think really hearing jazz live from a young age is what really got me interested in wanting to learn to play an instrument. Even more so than just hearing the records around the house. So from that young age, when you saw those musicians on stage, did you think to yourself, man, I want to be up there doing what they're doing? It made me want to learn how to play an instrument, and then I don't remember necessarily thinking at that time that I was going to be necessarily a professional musician, but it certainly got me interested in wanting to play. And I started on piano, I guess when I was about so 6 or 7, something like that, and then learned a little guitar after that, and pick up the bass shortly after that.
Why is it that the bass makes the most sense? Why did you side with that instrument?
Well, I was always interested. I always liked, drums and bass, but I couldn't convince my mom to get me a drum kit. So I was like playing piano, and taking piano lessons, and then I learned a little bit of guitar, a few chords and a little bit of guitar for a film that I was in with my father when I was about 12 or so, I think, or 13. And I had a lot of friends in high school who were musicians, and but they were always guitar players or drummers or trumpet players, stuff like that. So there wasn't any bass players, so I kind of picked up the electric bass and started teaching myself. It just kind of came naturally to me. So I seem to stick with that.
Nice. So when you went to the University of Southern California, you studied film, but you ended up going with music. Why did music win out over film for you?
Those are the two things that I grew up with, and that I've always loved the most and been the most passionate about. But I don't know. It was a matter that the music. I just decided that music was what I loved more. Than trying to be a filmmaker. But I don't know. Music was always what I think was moved me the most. I think so. That's kind of what I decided to stick with. Especially around that time, I started really, thinking that maybe that was what I wanted to do was music professionally. When I was about 18 or so.
When you're a jazz fan, you hear all these musicians that play at these hallowed institutions and these great halls and venues throughout the world. What was one of the first places that you played at that you were like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm on this stage, I'm doing this, I'm performing? Was there a moment like that for you?
There's been a few of those. It was pretty exciting to play Monterey the first time I played Monterey, because that was one of the first places. I grew up just down the road, and it was probably where I saw some of my first live music, and so that was kind of an exciting one. It's always exciting to go back there and play. I've played there quite a few times now, but that's always a great one. It's my hometown, and there's usually family and friends are usually always there. So that's always a good one. There's a lot of great festivals in Europe that are a lot of fun to play at. That are like old ones. The Antibes Jazz Festival is always a great one to play. But Monterey was definitely an exciting one.
And over your career, you've released albums on your own. You've released them with groups. You've released soundtrack recordings. What's the difference that you have? Do you go into projects approaching it from a different standpoint, or is it just you're playing, you're in, this is what you do, and you're going for it?
Doing film projects are approached differently. It's quite a different process doing film music than it is, playing jazz or doing, making your own albums or writing your own music for that. But, film music's it's more about, you're playing more of a supporting role, and you're writing something to support what's already on the screen. And it's a lot more of, sitting at the piano and recording the computer and kind of editing and moving things around it. It's a lot more of that than it is, just sort of writing tunes and then sort of, playing it free with musicians, and developing it that way.
How do you feel about your career so far? You've had quite a full career with, as I've mentioned, with soundtracks and releasing material on your own and touring. Do you feel good about how your jazz career has played out up to this point?
I do, yeah. I feel very lucky to, I think it's great to be able to, you can make a living, doing something you love, and doing music. I think it's, I feel quite blessed in that way. So, I'm happy, it's nice to do. I enjoy doing film music as well. The most musically satisfying thing for me, I think, is playing, and playing live with musicians. But I like working in the studio, and I like doing film music. But like I said, they're two kind of very different processes and two different ways of making music.
Is there a level of making music for film that's more satisfying because there's a greater saturation of the audience, or does it make a difference one way or another?
I don't know. I don't really think of it in that way. I mean, I'm always just trying to make music that I'm trying to write something that I think for film that supports the sort of emotion of the film and supports the film in a way, and complements the film. So, I know. I mean, I've always been very happy to work on films, and it's been always been a great experience to work with my father. He's good to work with. He gives you. I mean, there's certain things he has a very distinct idea of what he wants for certain scenes or certain parts of his films, and then there's other times where he gives you a lot of musical freedom, creative freedom, and just says, come up with something for that. So it's a good balance in that respect, and it's always a pleasure.
So let me ask you this: as you look down the road in your career, you're in full stride. Are there musicians, are there projects, are there venues, are there regions of the world that you want to go to? What's on your radar? What do you want to do?
We might be going. We're talking about trying to get down to Australia and to play, which is a place I've never been to. So that's one place. It's on my list of places to go play. I'd love to go there. I mean, I just did some. I haven't actually done any film music for a little while. The last thing I did was about a year ago. The music for my sister directed her second film called Battlebeak, so I did music for that, and I think that just came out in the last month or so. Right now, I'm just sort of focusing on touring and playing music that we just recorded and working on for the latest album. So we've got a lot of dates coming up in Europe, starting in the spring, and we go to Japan in February in Japan and in China for a bit. I think, like I said, traveling and playing live is the most fun for me. So,
speaking of traveling, the beauty of Kansas City, especially with 18 and Vine, is that rich history of everything that happened back in the heyday and all the ghosts bumping around. So I want to ask you this: if you could get into kind of a fantasy mindset, the jazz DeLorean pulls up in front of your house. You can punch digits in. You can go wherever you want. Who do you want to see live? Where do you want to go?
Well, I'd love to go to Kansas City. Actually, I've never been. It'll be my first time, so that's definitely one. That's definitely one on my list. I would say, it's definitely places to check out. I mean, I'm a big fan of a lot of the music of jazz from sort of 50s and then into the early 60s. So I don't know. Maybe New York would have been a great time to see a lot of great jazz around that time. From about 55 to 65. Maybe Paris at some point. I don't know. There's a lot of. I'm a big fan of music. Of all this old music. So I'm always sort of looking back with nostalgia on a lot of those jazz.
Absolutely. You've dedicated your life to jazz. Why do you love jazz?
I think most people get into it because it's the freedom you have to play how you want and express yourself how you want, and I think you're always sort of searching for that moment that you get occasionally where you're playing with people and everything sort of falls into place and clicks, and it's that sort of fleeting moment you get sometimes where it's almost like a telepathic thing. I think that's what we're always sort of chasing.
The one thing about jazz, as you mentioned, kind of in a romanticism kind of way about the 50s, and just the evolution and just the timeline of jazz is always here. How do you see jazz continuing forever? I mean, there's always the elder statesman wants jazz to stay around. There's films made about musicians that have had lore that shed more light on it. How do you see us jazz isn't necessarily one of the most popular art forms out there as far as live venues, but how do you see the collective, whether it's radio people or musicians, keeping this music, and filmmakers, keeping this music alive forever?
Well, I think there's always, great young musicians coming up that will keep it alive, and I think, I don't know, I think it's great that there's certain people who want to play it exactly the way it was played from certain eras, and that, are sort of scholars of it, and in that way, I'm certainly I'm certainly open to, blending different styles of music. I love jazz, but I've never been a purist or sort of jazz snob, So I'm into lots of different kinds of music. So I don't know. I think, I mean, you can certainly blend different styles of music. I think, and as long as it's done in a tasteful and musical way, it's valid.
So everyone has a version of Kyle Eastwood. Your family, your friends, your coworkers, those that attend your shows and buy your music. But when you wake up and you face today, who do you think you are?
That's a good question. I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I'm a musician, really. I mean, I love jazz, and I think jazz is sort of predominantly what I do, I guess. I mean, I love music, so I'm just a musician, and that's sort of been, the love of my life, I guess.
Beautiful. Kyle, thank you for taking some time out for me and opening up about your life and your music, and most certainly thank you for all the music.
Wow. My pleasure. Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for listening and tuning in to yet another Neon Jazz interview, where we give you a bit of insight into the finest players in L.A., New York, Kansas City, and spots all over the world, giving fans all that jazz. And thanks to Kyle for his music, his time, and his stories. If you want to hear more interviews, go to Famous Interviews with Joe Domino on the iTunes Store. Visit neonjazz at youtube.com, and for everything Neon Jazz, go to the neonjazz.blogspot.com. Until next time, enjoy the jazz, my friends.
Neon Jazz.